Welcome to Travel Tales, a mini-series within Distress to Joyful Bailey's Way podcast. I'm your host, Bailey Raber, here to travel the world with you. In each episode, you'll hear firsthand how my travel experiences have gone, both within the United States and abroad. Together, we'll discover new cultures, learn about a variety of new places for you to go out and explore, bring light to how I navigate my bipolar disorder while traveling, and, most importantly, we'll have fun. You'll leave each episode stocked full of exciting new ideas, interesting information, and feeling like it's time to hop on a plane. So come on, friends, let's start exploring. Hello, friends. Today we are starting our adventure to Paris. So if you're on YouTube, I'm holding up a canvas of a beautiful painting of the Eiffel Tower. It's black and white. It's got some red in it with a little couple walking under an umbrella. I bought this while we were in Paris. I have been obsessed with Paris for a very long time. Speaking of which, that's actually part of the beginning of this story. So before I get started, I do want to warn you guys that this episode will be quite a bit shorter than normal. This is day one, part one, traveling to Paris, France from Houston, Texas. So I've dreamed of traveling to Paris for as long as I can remember. I even took French language courses in high school while most kids took Spanish, which was a much more useful language to learn as Texas has a lot of Hispanic culture. And I did this because I hope to one day get to explore the magic of Paris for myself. When my now husband and I started dating in 2020, I told him all about my lifelong dream of Parisian travel, and he was more than happy to hop on the bandwagon with me. As an avid traveler himself, he's always looking to add new destinations to his never-ending travel bucket list, a quality of his that I truly adore. The global pandemic quickly took over and travel became basically non-existent, so we spent hours upon hours researching and planning future travel adventures to help pass the time. So finally, in 2023, we were ready to set our Parisian plan into motion. The first 9-hour flight from George Bush Intercontinental Airport into Amsterdam Schiphol Airport felt like a breath of fresh air after having taken multiple 14-plus hour flights to India in the past year. Yeah, if you haven't tuned into any of my episodes about India, go to it. I feel like it's probably Travel Tales number 4, but it's India Trip Day 1 Part 1, where I talk about my first flight to India. Y'all, it was rough. It was rough. So 9 hours felt like nothing after doing that. So after arriving in the airport, we had a couple of hours of a layover until we would board our final flight into Paris. So while waiting, we decided to have breakfast at McDonald's as they have different menus in different countries, and we love to try the local menus. So fun fact about McDonald's, I'm pretty positive I mentioned this I feel like it was part 2 or day 2 of India trip. You can go back and check it out for yourself if you haven't already tuned in. But McDonald's has different menus for every single country. I think they learned the hard way that you can't just take the American McDonald's and put it in all the other countries and expect these other cultures to enjoy it like we do here. So, like in India, for example, they have an entire vegetarian menu, which was so bomb. I ate so much McDonald's this last trip to India. So we now made it our thing that every time we go to a new country, we try McDonald's. So we actually recently did that in Thailand too. When we were in Thailand, we tried it here in the Amsterdam airport. We tried it in Paris, and we also tried it in Brussels in Belgium. So I've had 5 different McDonald's I've had 5 different countries of tasting McDonald's. I'm going to find a much better way to say that one day, but you get the point. You get it. So one of the specialties in the Netherlands is friet sauce, which is a delicious dipping sauce that the Dutch pair with their French fries. And Mickey D's version was absolutely tasty. So after that, we popped on into Starbucks because Moni needed his daily coffee fix. The first thing that we noticed about this Dutch Starbucks was the amount of pastries available. They had a much larger array of options than that of the cafes in the US, which Moni and I decided is a good thing because we don't need that kind of sugary temptation on a regular basis back home. While there was an enormous selection of sugary sweets available, it was very interesting to notice that not many people were actually purchasing them. We were curious if Europeans have less of a sweet tooth than us, or if this was just pure coincidence. And I also wonder if maybe because these sweets are so readily available, people just don't, like, they're not seeking after them like we might, being Americans from the US and not having these options. I don't know. If you've not been to Europe, I just want to throw it out there that Europe has incredible pastries and breads. So good, especially France. Other countries do have amazing pastries too, don't get me wrong. But this trip is about Paris, France. So, like, yeah, you're going to hear a lot about incredible pastries. And it's kind of made me like a little dessert snob. Like, for example, when we were in India recently, there were some Indian desserts. They're either too sweet or they're just not sweet enough for me. And I'm a big texture person. Like, when I have desserts, I want them to either be creamy or fluffy or smooth. And Indian desserts aren't always like that. Sometimes they're super thick, they're like crumbly, they're not always the texture that I prefer. Like, I prefer the texture of European pastries. I've now kind of become a little snob. Try not to eat too many desserts back home and just save it all for when we travel to Europe. But yeah, that's a little fun fact about me and desserts. So after grabbing our coffees, we found a nearby area with some outlets available. So we took a seat and spent some time charging our phones, as we still had at least an hour until our boarding time would begin. Moni got up to find the restroom, and not long after leaving, the lady sitting at the table next to ours looked at me and said, she said, "Do you" in English, and then proceeded to finish her sentence in Dutch. She apparently thought that I looked like I speak Dutch, which I found to be hilarious. So when I told her that I don't speak Dutch, she quickly apologized, then continued the conversation in English. She told me that she is the director of a children's choir and that she was heading to San Diego, California for work. She then asked if I would take a video of her sending a message to her students about traveling to America for the first time. I have no idea what she said in the video because the entire message was in Dutch, but I thought that the idea was really, really sweet. So really, really interesting thing is that this was actually the first of what would become many different interactions with strangers throughout Europe where I was assumed to be able to speak a language other than English. It happened multiple times, y'all. It was crazy. So I'm going to slide in one really fast that I'll tell again later. But so, also just a little preface. Ooh, I should look up that word. I think it's preface. So this trip to Paris, France, we started out in Paris. We spent a week in Paris. Then we went to Brussels, Belgium by train for just one day. And then by train, we finished off in Amsterdam, and we spent 3 days in Amsterdam, Netherlands. And then we took a train back to Paris, spent 2 more days in Paris, and then flew back to Texas. So, while we call this our Paris trip because the main point of this trip was going to Paris, we did sneak in a few other countries because, y'all, in my opinion, if you're going to Europe, you might as well hit up as many countries as you can, or at least one other country that's close to the main country that you're heading into. Europe travel by train is so cheap and easy. It is so cheap and easy, and it's beautiful to ride trains throughout Europe. You're going to hear more about that later on in this series, but it is absolutely breathtaking and just so, like I said, cheap and easy. You can country hop like nothing. It's insane. Growing up in the U.S. and specifically down here in South Texas, it takes hours to even just leave Texas. Hours. And the closest country that we could go to by car is Mexico, but the border is not a great place to be right now. So I can't easily get to other countries without hopping on a flight. So the fact that I can get on a train, pay $30 or less, and take it an hour and a half, and now I'm in a whole nother country, Y'all, it's wild. If you've not been to Europe, I highly suggest tuning in to all of these episodes, especially if you're hoping to plan a trip one day. And just so you kind of get an idea of what we did and how easy this was. It's so much easier than you guys might think it is. So much easier. So just tune in. I'll give you guys all the tips and tricks. Yeah. So, we're almost done. Let's get Oh, I totally forgot to mention the funny thing about speaking another language than English. So, when we were at Amsterdam, it happened so many times. People just assumed that I spoke Dutch. I guess because I'm a happy person and the Dutch are very happy people, that they're just like, oh, she's a happy white person. She must be Dutch. I don't know. It happened a lot. It was really funny. I actually enjoyed it a lot. And it only happened a couple times in Paris, very few times. But one time was interesting because an American thought that I could speak French because I was speaking a little bit of French. You know, just about 10 minutes ago I mentioned I took French courses in high school. Some of that I still remembered while we were here in Paris, which was actually like really cool and surprising. So I was speaking as much French as possible. That's just what I try to do when I go to other countries. It's just it's respectful to the country that you're in to just use as much language, their own language as possible. Learn whatever you can. I always recommend that. And I was speaking some French, I guess. I don't remember what I said. And this girl, I know she was American because you can tell. You can hear the accent. I'm like, oh, this girl's American. So she was speaking to me in like whatever little broken French that she used. And I just responded in English. And she just kind of looked at me like, oh. Yeah. Really, really funny. These things just, they crack me up. Okay, so while we were sitting on our final plane to Paris, the trip did not feel quite real yet. I'm not sure why, but it might have had something to do with not being able to fathom that this dream that I've had for so long was finally becoming a reality. I often struggle with imposter syndrome and feeling like I don't deserve good things in life, though I believed that as soon as I saw the Eiffel Tower in person with my own two eyes, that these feelings about this particular trip would quickly wash away. Okay, so that's the end of this article that I wrote, and I guess I forgot to mention more about my obsession with Paris. I thought I'd put more in here than I did. I just said as long as I can remember. So let me give you a little backstory as to why I have an obsession with Paris, and all of this kind of makes sense as to who I am as a person and all that. So I remember I was probably maybe 11, 12, 13, something around those ages. I was definitely a preteen, not in high school yet. It was either junior high or late middle school. And I was at my grandma's house in Dallas. Every time we went up there, we didn't really do much. We watched a lot of Lifetime movies. If any of y'all remember the Lifetime movie channel, we watched a ton of those. And I remember watching a movie about Coco Chanel. So if you don't know anything about the Chanel luxury brand, the woman who started it, her nickname was Coco. Everybody called her Coco. Her last name was Chanel. Her real name was actually Gabrielle. So Gabrielle Chanel. She started out as a hat maker in, I believe it was the 1910s or 1920s. Don't quote me on the dates. But she started out making hats. And then eventually she revolutionized fashion for women. So she was living in Paris, France. She created, so let me kind of give you an idea. Women in the early 1900s were still wearing corsets and giant skirts and bustles and clothing like that was from the 1800s. That's not easy to move in. It's not practical. It was for women who just didn't work or like didn't have, I don't know, didn't have much that they needed to move for. And Coco Chanel was a big time rebel. One of the reasons why I love her. And she was like, we're not doing this anymore. This is ridiculous. I can't move. Let's change this. So she came up with these suits. And these suits were just like a jersey knit pencil skirt and the Chanel jacket, which everybody knows the Chanel style jacket. If you don't know that, just Google Chanel jacket and you might recognize the photo. You've seen it on movies, TV, something. I actually made one in my couture dressmaking class last semester, which was so cool. But besides the point. So I watched a movie about her and I just fell in love. I'm like, wow, she is a rebel. She's a badass, and I love the way she dresses. Her style has always been very classy and elegant. Pearls. I'm obsessed with pearls, and I attribute a lot of that to Coco Chanel. So my obsession with Paris came from, you guessed it, Coco Chanel. So that was a huge reason why I chose to take French in high school, because my obsession with Paris. And I've always had my bathroom be Paris themed. Like, our current bathroom is Paris themed. Actually, this canvas here, I had originally bought this and one other one, which I'll show in the next episode, for our bathroom. Because again, the bathroom was Paris themed. But I ended up putting these on our wall in our living room because we've started collecting art from around the world. This is completely off subject, but we've started collecting art from around the world. And these are hanging in the living room. We brought a piece home from India recently. We bought some stuff in Thailand. And then we're going to Europe again soon. So we'll bring back some stuff from there also. But I actually didn't get anything, like any art from Belgium or from the Netherlands, because we didn't come up with this concept until after we came home and decided, wait a second, why should we hide these in our private bathroom in our bedroom when we could display them in the living room and then get to tell stories about them? Like, so cool. Yeah. All right. So that is it for day 1, part 1. Day 2 is meeting Monish's Paris family, which we have family who live in Paris, so that's going to be really fun to tell you guys about, and exploring Paris at nighttime. That was not in the plan whatsoever. His cousin offered to do that with us. It was impromptu. It was gorgeous. It was phenomenal. So that being said, I don't have many pictures for today, so if you're watching on YouTube, there's going to maybe be 1 or 2 photos at the end of this. But next episode, day 1, part 2, is going to be filled with photos and videos. So get ready. But until next time, take it easy, stay grateful, and be joyful. Bye. Thanks for tuning in to another episode of Travel Tales. Head on over to whatishaybellsdoing.com/travel to find the resources mentioned in today's episode. If you enjoyed this episode, please leave a rating on your favorite listening platform or write a review on Apple Podcasts. Also, don't forget to hit the subscribe button to stay up to date on new episode releases. See you next time for another great adventure. Bye!